In front of me today, I have what I consider two of the best Android phones on the market right now, and that is obviously the Galaxy S9 Plus and the Galaxy Note 8. So both of these phones came about 6 months apart, not even 6 months, about 5 months apart. And I've only had the Galaxy Note 8 for 3 months or so. So they're both fairly new phones to me, and I've really enjoyed the Samsung devices of recently, which made me wonder which of these phones is the best one and which one you should pick up. And the key point here, which this video will focus on, is what are the changes, what are the differences between the S9 and the Note 8. So without wasting any time, let's get right into the differences. So starting off, one of the first differences is the width. And no, I didn't get rid of the Galaxy S9, it's just hiding under the Note 8. So the Galaxy Note 8 is actually 4.4 millimeters wider, so 4.4 mm wider than the Galaxy S9 Plus. It's also 1.1 mm larger, so it's a millimeter longer in height, and it's 0.1 mm thicker. So the thickness is actually, you can't even tell the real difference here. If I have both of these right next to each other, honestly, even I struggle to see which one is thicker. I'd say that at first glance, actually the S9 looks a little bit thicker than the Note 8. But the reality is that the Note 8 is larger, wider, and thicker of the two phones. So that is a interesting little know-how. But an interesting thing furthermore is that while the dimensions might be a lot bigger on the Note 8, the display is actually really close. So this has a 6.3-inch display, whereas the S9 Plus has a 6.23-inch display. So it's very, very minimal difference. And this display actually has more PPI than this one. So the S9 Plus has 529 pixels per inch. The Note 8 has 521 PPI. Now, they're actually fairly similar. You really can't tell the difference when you're watching videos or looking at the display. It's just a little bit of a difference there. However, one of the key changes is that the Galaxy Note 8 is quite a bit, it's heavier. It's not quite a bit, but it's definitely heavier than the S9 Plus. So the S9 Plus weighs in at 189 grams. The Note 8 comes in at 195 grams. So, you can't tell them. It's not like a big difference, but if you have both of these in your hand, it's very clear that one of them is a lot a lot heavier than the other. And the Note 8's weight distribution even throws it off further, because it feels like you're holding a very top-heavy phone with the Note 8, whereas the S9 Plus feels a lot more comfortable. And another thing is that the phone is a lot more squared off here in comparison to the S9 Plus. So it kind of just, the entire effect of that makes the phone feel a lot heavier and bigger than it actually is. And the S9 feels a lot smaller than it actually is. So moving on, let's look at the processor. So the Galaxy Note 8 comes in two variants. One is the Exynos 8895 and the other is the Snapdragon 835. The S9 and S9 Plus, they come in Exynos 9810 and the Snapdragon 845 processor. So it depends on which market you buy the phone in, but the Exynos and Snapdragon are fairly equivalent of each other. But the newer version is a lot better, and the new chipset allows for a lot more features that I'll explain later in the video. And a key difference between these two phones is something that I'm actually surprised about, and that is the battery. So while this is shorter, narrower, and less thick than the Note 8, this actually has a much larger battery. So the Note 8 has a 33 milliamp hour battery. This has a 3,500 milliamp hour battery. And my guess is that this has a lot more space to work with because they don't have to waste a lot of space with this stylus. So the Note 8 comes with a stylus, and while it doesn't look like that's such a big deal, when you put the stylus on top of the phone like this, it kind of comes to show that there's actually this much space on the device that is actually just cordoned off for this stylus. So that kind of explains why the battery is smaller on the Note 8 than it is on the S9 Plus, despite it being the larger device. And one thing I can definitely tell you is the battery life it feels a lot better on the S9 Plus. The Note 8 was never the best in terms of battery, and even because of that, I kind of felt a little bit unhappy with the phone, but really it wasn't that big of a deal. But this one, it makes things a bit better. While it's still not in comparison to some of the other phones of this size, such as the iPhone 8 Plus, it definitely gets you through an entire day of medium to light usage. Let's move on and look at some of the more physical changes. And that one of the main changes is the way that these displays are set up. So both of these displays are curved and have actually their own kind of way of doing the curve. So the Note 8 actually has a lot more flat surface and only the very edges are curved off. Whereas the S9 and S9 Plus, what they have is they have a lot more curved surface. So while a lot of people prefer the more flat central area and then they prefer the steep edges, I actually prefer the way the S9 is. It makes the phone feel a lot more natural and a lot thinner, to be honest with you guys. This, on the other hand, you know, there's also this more squared off look. So when you look at the curves, they're a lot more pronounced on the S9, especially in terms of the display. So it cuts off a lot more here, but it doesn't on the on the Note 8. But honestly, I kind of prefer this over this because you're still losing detail. This one just makes the entire thing feel a lot better. One of the key changes as well is that this one, the corner is a lot more squared off and sharper. I don't know if that's the exact word I'd want to use, but it definitely is a lot more cumbersome to hold than this one because of the lack of the curves. This is a lot more curved and it really does give you a nice feel in the hand, especially when you hold it with a case. When you put a case on the Note 8, it becomes really thick and honestly very heavy to carry. And another key difference is that the camera orientation has now changed. So it's gone from horizontal to vertical. Now there's no big changes with the secondary and the front-facing camera, but the main camera is a very good upgrade. So the what we have here is a similar megapixel dual fixed aperture lens. So there are two fixed apertures that you can vary between on the S9 and S9 Plus, which make these phones a lot better in low light. I mean, the Note 8 wasn't bad in low light at all, but now the S9 just makes things a lot better, and low light shots on this phone really do look good. Along with the change in camera position, we see that the fingerprint scanner location has also changed. So instead of being in this very awkwardly high position, we have it much lower, and it does feel a lot more comfortable. And one of the other physical changes we have is the frame of the phone. So the frame of the phone now, instead of being the glossy finish, is now a matte finish. So the camera never does this justice, but I'll try to show it off as much as I can here. So you guys can see that this has a glossier look and this has a much more matte, less reflective finish, but this color, the way it is, it looks like it's reflecting a lot more on camera, but it's not, trust me. And I said this in a previous video comparing to the S8, I actually do prefer this matte look. It does look a lot nicer. And it is now an upgraded aluminum 7000 series, so that just means that it adds a lot more to the sturdiness and the total overall durability of the device, which is never a bad thing. The stylus is one of the key differentiators between the S9 and the Note 8. So you get the stylus on the Note 8, but honestly, for what I've used the phone for and what most people will be using this phone for, I don't think the stylus is a very necessary upgrade. I mean, it's definitely cool to have it, but I don't think anybody would be extremely devastated if that wasn't an option on their phone or if it wasn't available on their phones. So as I was talking about the camera now, we have the camera with that new dual variable aperture, and there's also a new 960 frames per second slow-mo mode. So those slow-mo videos look so much nicer. They slow them down to a very incredible level, and you can see so much more detail, and it's honestly a very cool feature. And the camera also now comes with multi-frame image processing. That is thanks to the Snapdragon 845 and Exynos 9810. And as I explained earlier, the multi-frame image processing is actually it's a process where when you click a picture, 3 to 4 variations of that same photo are taken, and the best parts of each photo is analyzed and stitched together into one final photo. And an AI does that in the background, and it's amazing the results it can produce. That's kind of the reason why the Pixel 2 has such great results. It uses that multi-frame image processing, and the overall image qualities just really speak for themselves. There's also these AR emojis on the S9 Plus. They're not that useful. They're not something that I would call a very big selling feature of the phone, but it's there. It's very similar to Apple's Emojis. It creates an avatar of yourself, and it mimics your facial movements. The tracking isn't the best. It's still most definitely a gimmick, and I really wouldn't say that this would be anything close to a selling point for this phone, but it's there, so I just thought I'd mention that difference. And then the front camera on this phone now supports the selfie portrait mode. So it's called a live focus selfie or something like that, but it basically does what all the other phones, this trend of having the front camera have a portrait blur effect in the background as well. So that is now available on the S9 Plus. I actually haven't tried this out yet, but from the image samples I saw from other people, it seems to do a decent job. And as I mentioned earlier, the front camera and the secondary camera, this camera, are both exactly the same unit on both of these phones. There's no changes between them. So those images are going to look exactly the same regardless of which phone you have. One of the main reasons why I jumped at buying this phone was the dual stereo speaker. So I love the Note 8, but one of the things I couldn't help but feel bad about every time I use this phone was the lack of stereo speakers. So I love watching movies and YouTube on my phone, and this phone the display is so good, but it's let down by the speakers. The S9, that's why I was so excited for those dual speakers, because I could finally enjoy content with the clarity of audio that I wanted. Now, while these speakers aren't anything to brag about on the S9 either, they're a big jump from the Note 8. There's a lot better audio clarity, and the details and the effect of the sound is also definitely improved. Not to mention that since you do have a front-firing speaker now, when you're watching videos like this, you can't help but realize how much better and louder the audio sounds. And one of the final features is Smart Scan. So Smart Scan is a combination of iris and facial scanning, which the S9 uses to unlock your phone. So just watch how the S9 will quickly unlock using both of these on my phone. So 1, 2, 3. And let me show you the Note 8. So as you saw, there was a lot more hesitance on the Note 8. That was because it's using the iris scanner. And the iris scanner on its own actually isn't as effective. It's effective, but you need to have a lot of perfect conditions for it. So it needs to be in a certain position in front of your face. It needs to be, your positioning has to be really good with that. The Smart Scan, what it does is it pieces together the iris data and the facial data of you, and it uses both of those, a combination of those, to unlock the phone. So it's able to ID you a lot quicker than it is on the Note 8. And it's actually a lot more secure as well. So with that, the changes for these phones comes to an end, and these phones actually do have a lot in common. They share a lot of stuff, and it's actually uncanny. The positioning of the mics, the positioning of the buttons and everything, it's identical. And there's a lot of things that these two share in common, but there's a lot that's different about them too. And my verdict on this is that if you have the Galaxy Note 8, don't buy the S9 Plus. It's a waste of money to upgrade and change over. However, if you're in the market for the Note 8 and the S9 Plus, for almost every single user who will ask me, 99% of the people, I would say get the S9 Plus. And I'll tell you why. The S9 Plus retails for $840. The Note 8 retails for $1,000. So if you buy the unlocked version of these phones, there's already $160 price gap. And this one has everything this has except for that stylus, and it has actually more improved features. It has the dual speakers that this one doesn't have. And overall, I think that this is the much better deal. And not to mention, even if these were the same price, I would still recommend the S9 Plus. And that's because I feel like the stylus, while it is a very useful thing for a lot of consumers, it's just not there. It's just not a big thing for most users out there. So I'd say that the demographic, the market for the stylus isn't that big. People don't buy the Note 8 solely for the stylus. They buy it because of the screen size and a whole lot of other things that the Note incorporates into a phone. And I think that the S9 Plus captures the essence of this phone very well and translates it very well. So I personally, any day of the week, I would take the S9 Plus over the Note 8. Let me know what you guys think about that. Which one would you choose if it was your money on the line? And let me know why. If you enjoyed this video, guys, please consider subscribing to the channel if you already haven't. Be sure to check out my other videos on the Note 8 and the S9 Plus. And also follow me on social media for all the behind-the-scenes stuff of filming and testing these devices. I have all the links down in the description below. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.